Aloha, my name's Anna Covert, and coming sheath my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is empowering leaders to drive change. My special guest is Danaya Wilson, CEO of BetterCertify, public speaker, and Forbes author of Changemakers Wanted, Your Blueprint for Lasting Impact and Ethical Change. There were 17 years in innovation and compliance education and a passion for ethical leadership. Danaya is here to share her transformative journey and powerful new book. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Although I do wish it was in person because you're in Oahu.
Yes, it's always, we should start doing them in person always.
Yes, I would gladly front the cost for that travel.
So to kick it off, can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey and the vision you had for BetterCertify and maybe how it's evolved since then?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm very family oriented, and I think my entire journey has been almost a result of my family's innovation and entrepreneurship. So when I graduated my undergrad, it was in 2007, and I got my degree was in marketing, and I started to look at, okay, what do I want to do with my life? I'm still living at home, and at that time, the state of the economy in 2007, 2008 was terrible. We were having the Great Recession, and people weren't hiring for marketing jobs. And I was going on these interviews that were really for like door-to-door salesmen for a marketing job. And I'm like, is this what my degree earns me, my hard work? And so really, I just kind of felt hopeless and a little bit of loss. My parents at the same time were starting up a hazardous material abatement firm. And my dad was just kind of like, hey, you don't have to do this forever, but why don't you just start working with us, write our business plan, maybe do a little bit of marketing. And then when you find your footing, you can take off. Well, I ended up working for them from 2007 to 2015 when I started BetterCertify. And I really just took that opportunity to grow, to dominate in a male dominated industry, to kind of have an outside perspective, because I definitely was in a space that didn't have, one, a lot of females, and then two, a lot of females like me, age, education, background. And then, I talk a lot, and we'll get into this. My book, I talk a lot about this in the book, but originally I started BetterCertify because I wanted summers off. At that time, I was married. Yeah, like, so, with construction, with the hazardous material abatement, you're busy during the summers because that's when schools are out. And so I wanted summers off so I could travel. My husband at that time was a school teacher and he had summers off. And so I was like, I've got to innovate. I've got to create. And then that's where I really leaned into creating an online training entity and innovating in that space. And then also, I am very passionate about accessibility. And I was having individuals under my parents' company, there was a training arm. I was having individuals drive 4 hours to take a 4 hour class. And it just felt like it doesn't make sense. So that's where, where I've come in my professional life is really innovating in this space and bringing technology to almost an antiquated industry.
Well, it's really interesting and yes, so impactful, right? That you really can be educated anywhere, right? And does it you really need to be there physically, right? So what inspired you to take the time now to write this new book?
Yeah. So I had a daughter. I gave birth in the end of October 2022, and I started to really look at what kind of impact I wanted to leave, what kind of world did I want to leave for her, and looking at it from that lens of motherhood for the first time, instead of just, okay, how do we innovate and change a whole entire industry? Looking at it like, what tangibly can I leave behind for her? I was like, we need to really look at women's empowerment and what movements, what systems need to be put into place to pass a better world on to this future generation. And I thought the timing was not right at all. I at the time I started writing, she was 18 months old, and it was quite honestly the hardest thing I have ever done. But I needed answers to these questions. I needed to know, what could we do as business owners, as entrepreneurs, to pave this pathway to make it possible for future generations of women to lead, to thrive. And I really approached it like a research project almost. How do I get these answers? What are current companies doing? What are current I call them change makers? What are current change makers doing in their respective industries? And I really came out with some concrete answers that I think can help a lot of people moving forward.
Wow, that's really cool. So, how do you define this change maker, and what qualities are essential for someone to drive this lasting impact?
Yeah, so I really didn't define a change maker. I did that on purpose because what I want is, does this message resonate with you? Do you self-identify as a change maker? I think that the individuals who are already starting to like say, "Hey, I'm a change maker. I want to go forward," are ones that are primarily women because there is a collective understanding of our shared experience. They are self-starters, individuals that are like not going to just be okay with the status quo. That this message is really impactful and goes beyond just saying, okay, you're a woman in a business. Here's the issues that you're going to come across. Here's how to get over them. It's the systems weren't built for you to succeed, or really weren't even built with you in mind. And here's how we kind of rebuild those systems to make it easier for women to thrive, to lead, to be present. And if that message resonates, then just by that, you're willing to take up this charge. And there's a lot that I'm asking of these change makers. Um, it's not just let's talk, it's let's get stuff done.
Yeah. So, what's an example of one of these key initiatives that someone could, that we're overcoming?
Yeah, for sure. So what I found were two barriers that really, if we didn't do something as a society, if we didn't do something in our organizations to change, to address, we're going to continue to significantly affect the future trajectory of women in leadership positions. One being childcare crisis. We have to, one, acknowledge that this isn't just a personal problem, but a societal problem. And the responsibility can't just be passed on, one, to the individuals who have the child, but two, to government. It needs to be something, I think, that is organizationally driven. And then two, as we really learned with the pandemic, it is insane how much women are tasked with doing, and not even just from an external source, but internally. We are the caretakers. We are the ones that are getting stuff done. And I'm not saying anything against men. What this movement is about is, it's about women. It's about these mothers, these inherent givers. And if we don't instill flexibility into our workforce, into our organizations, then we're really cutting out a vast majority of the population that wants to work.
I mean, that's really, yeah, it's really interesting you say that because I think after, especially here in Hawaii, I can't go even into any restaurant. We like to go to CPK, me, my mom, and my daughter. My daughter, she's 10 and a half. And so, we go to California Pizza Kitchen every week. And just before the pandemic, they had opened this whole nother section of the restaurant, right? And now, half of it's, they won't even see people. And
Yep.
it's like, well, what's going on? Oh, we can't get enough people to work. We can't get enough people. And it's just a common thing you keep hearing that there's this huge gap in the workplace. I think that what you're bringing up is really important. It's like, well, who are we like allowing the opportunity to work? I mean, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you can't, yeah, but what are you going to pick over if, these specific hours or, is that the reason why so many people haven't come back to work?
Yeah. The term that's being used is these sidelined workers, these individuals that want to work but can't work specifically because of, excuse me, their caretaking responsibilities. And that could even extend to children or to aging parents. And what we're facing right now, that's kind of like the aha moment to a certain extent is that there's so many solutions that are brought to us through just the advancement of technology. And so what if we were able to just accept those solutions, like what AI is bringing to the table and how that alleviates a lot of the tasks that women would be primarily responsible for doing? What if we allow that to just be okay? And then we now can look at this workforce, what the tasks that they need to get done as almost being shifted, quite honestly. And maybe they don't need to spend 40 hours. I mean, let's really look into what we want from our workforce. And some places like a restaurant might be a little bit more rigid on what they're able to, where their flexibility can come from. But a lot of corporate America, organizational culture that is dealing with office spaces and a heavy influence of technology, we can be way more flexible than we are.
And really, it's productive. I think that's I always think about it. Same thing with media waste, right? It's like that, just because we did it the same way and in this 40-hour schedule doesn't mean that, now with, like, to your point with AI, you could do that same task in half the time. And that doesn't mean that you should be paid half the amount. It just means that you're going to be more productive. And it
Absolutely.
made me think, one other thing, but you mentioned is, the childcare, right? And, my mom's Swedish, and in Sweden, when you have a baby,
Oh, yeah.
you get a year off. And,
Mhm.
and then your partner also can take 6 months off. Right.
Mhm.
And then if they don't take it, you can take more. But I think that's, this 6 weeks of maternity leave is laughable. And we both have kids. I mean, I can't even imagine leaving my I was so lucky that I worked from home and I had support and I could,
Mhm.
have that. But then you're looking at the difference of, oh, well, I could pay someone else to watch my child grow up and go to this job, right? Or to stay home.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of the times the arguments, or maybe the way things have always been done, shadows over this because we're looking at the individual case instead of like society as a whole. So if we just talk about society as a whole, everybody almost would agree that it's better for the child to be in contact, in close contact with their mother and their father. It's better for the child to be breastfed up to a year, if it's possible. We know it's also better for the mother postpartum depression to have access to her child for longer than 6 weeks. So when we start looking at it from the lens of society and from, this the other side of it is we need women to have children. Like this is the sustainability of our species.
Right.
So, but when we look at it from those lenses, now all of a sudden it's like, well, now we're just being crazy as organizations. We're pushing people too hard, quite honestly, and making it too difficult. And the numbers are starting to show it. You're seeing even, I think, like, oh yeah, a survey from Motherly in 2023 just showed that the last year, 18% of moms left the workforce. I mean, you're seeing this huge exodus of women and mothers, and the reason why is because childcare is too expensive or really hard to find. And then even if we have those 6 weeks off, what about when your child gets sick? I mean, for the first year that my child was in daycare, after I was the same as you, like I was able to have the flexibility since I owned my own business. But she started daycare at 8 months. And when she started daycare, she was sick literally for that entire first year, it felt like. And
Yeah.
then so what happens then? Here I am, like just coming off having a kid, and then I had the 8 months of flexibility that I was able to kind of like work around and have a childcare provider come into the house so I could still work. And then I have another year where I'm sick all the time.
Yeah, and
And
then
that's
we share that with your workers, and it brings down all productivity.
Yep.
And so, how can uh, how can a company take these things into account and make some immediate changes that aren't going to necessarily, like, decimate their bottom line? They're thinking,
Yeah.
oh gosh, like, well, I can't let a woman take a year off, or like some of these easy things to the cycle to fall back into. How can you overcome that?
Yeah, because it is kind of hard, right? Like I think the walls come up. I definitely feel that as a small business owner, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm already uh, at the brink of trying to have the money to be able to afford all the initiatives that I'm already doing. And then they know childcare needs to be on top of the table. It's stressful, it's heavy. But what we can do, if we're talking on the flexibility on the topic of flexibility, what that looks like, there is something that I brought up in the book. It's these individual flexible benefit plans. And what it is basically when you and I are on a job interview, I already know as the hiring manager how much your compensation is going to cost the company through benefit packages. You may elect, like, hey, I don't want a healthcare plan. I'm already covered elsewhere. That cost should still be a benefit for you, and it allows for that to be converted to to a point system that you can utilize for other things. Maybe you're choosing to have a remote work environment, or maybe you're choosing to have a stipend for childcare. That's one of the ways that companies can do it pretty easily by not having the individual lose the compensation that they already were going to get, and then paving a way that they easily could apply that to something else. And then the benefit to the employer is that they can still retain that as like a tax write-off where, it is a cost for the employee as opposed to just, it's a sunk cost if they don't take advantage of it. The other thing is really looking at that output over input. And I think that goes across all employees now that we're looking at the effect of AI. What did you actually need me to do as an employee? And putting performance metrics that are tied to that as opposed to my input being a 40-hour work week, 8 to 5, and if I'm not there one day, I'm docked. Well, did I make it up on the day I came back? Because I guarantee you, a lot of the hardest working people I have ever had are mothers. They know how to get stuff
Mhm.
done because their time all of a sudden is just cut into so many different pieces and of this main pie, and they know how to make things work. And so start judging off of that, off of the output, instead of these quite honestly antiquated ways that the input has always been measured.
Totally. I think that that's a really great, easy to, and then and on that same note, that's kind of so my company. I have only independent contractors, and there's a lot of them, right? But that's part of it is that hey, do the this is what you're supposed to do. I don't care when you do it. I don't care how you do it, as long as it's done on time and up to spec, and that
Yeah.
creates a lot more flexibility. But at the same time, there can be there's a lot of things you can't do, right? When you have contractors, like you can't mandate a meeting, right? You can't
Yeah.
like some of those types of things. But what do you think that the biggest challenge we're facing in as a small, but what is the biggest challenge for companies to overcome some of these women leadership or what am I trying to say? It's like, what do you commonly see as the reasons that women aren't succeeding in the workplace beyond
I think so organizationally, I think that people are nervous to have this conversation. Quite honestly, I think even I run into that where it's like, well, I don't want to ostracize one half of my audience by just talking about women and not necessarily touching how it would affect a man. I think people are nervous to talk about gender, nervous to talk about diversity and inclusion. And so the first thing is to really lead in as a leader in transparency and honesty. I approach my team very, very candidly and say, like, I may mess up in this conversation. I'm just going to lay that out, but here's what I'm trying to achieve. And then can you help me with this situation? Can you help me come up with a plan that benefits us all? That works on a smaller, scale. You may not be able to do that if you have 10,000 employees underneath you. But I think the key is to lead transparently, as well as having a good ear into the needs and wants of your employees. Um, Individually, I think what is really hard, especially with women, is I think we feel, even though there's not quite as much of the scarcity that maybe our mothers dealt with in the workplace, meaning that there's not just one woman sitting at the table. Maybe there's more. Like, today there's more women in leadership positions than ever have been. So now we're seeing more women in these organizations, but we still almost feel like it's something that could be taken away from us. I mean, just look with what happened with like the right to have an abortion. And I'm not advocating for one way or another, but what I'm saying is that women are very well aware that our rights can be jeopardized. And I think it's hard for us to really stand up and say, no, this is something we need. This is something that we are almost refusing to go forward without getting. And that's that flexibility, that's systems that take us into consideration, not even just acknowledging that we need it, but actually building it around the needs, wants, and of a woman. I mean, to me, it's just there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's possible. Um, we just have to have those icky conversations almost.
Yeah, it's thinking you brought up a really good point because so many things are happening culturally, with these laws, the Roe versus Wade being reversed and even transgender children and their parents, what's happening. And like where we thought we were taking these steps forward and now all of a sudden we realize that we're taking steps backwards. And what is the trickle down effect of that? Because, I think now at the same time, we're so sensitive. Everyone's very sensitive. I mean, you can't. One of my favorite movies is You Don't Mess with the Zohan. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and I'm not a big Adam Sandler fan, but I love the Zohan. Whenever I'm feeling glum, I put it in, and I don't think that they could make that movie today.
No, and even the office is a big one like that.
Right.
I love watching that.
Absolutely, and I think, and that's part of it that we can't. We're not comfortable talking about it. And but then if we can't talk about it and we're going to be judged and things are being taken away, like then what is the other way that we can communicate, right, safely? And I think that's, to your point, that's something that a change maker has to be like, create that stability and create that trust. And internal communications plans can be effective for companies. We did that. I did one for American Savings Bank years ago when we called it the You Matter campaign. And we had, like handwritten cards, or they said you matter, and then the manager could write a note and put it on someone's desk, something tangible, or screensavers, or we call it ASB wisdom, like about shredding documents or protecting yourself from kind of some safety in the workplace. That they were cute, and we did like a survey later of how it increased morale, and did people know some of these new skills about how to not electrocute yourself. I mean, we should all kind of know that, but to your point, yeah. But I think that those can be little things that you could do you don't have to necessarily talk about it, but visual representation and messaging might be something that business owners listening to this could try out.
Okay, so I have a generalized anxiety disorder. And what I was able to do with that is have these tools that allowed me to have maybe these conversations that I was really uncomfortable with. Because no one likes to admit, like, hey, I'm panicking right now, or brief, you have, yeah, I'm gonna throw up real quick, or I need to stop because I have to go use the bathroom. And what I think leaders can do today is first create that culture of security. So you're not going to have hard conversations in a space that people feel unsafe in to start with. And that's why on a grander scale our society is struggling with having these open and honest dialogues, is because we don't feel safe, we don't feel heard, we don't feel appreciated. And so how do we create that within our organizations? And it really does unfortunately start with conversation, but it needs to be, the culture needs to be right to facilitate that. And I have always been maybe a little open, a little too open and honest, but my team knows a lot of where I come from. I'm very clear about, hey, my daughter's sick today. And instead of like painting it a different picture around it, like, this is exactly what I'm dealing with. And that also allows them to communicate openly and honestly about what they're dealing with. Because at the end of the day, we are all human and we need to start acting like that to a certain extent.
Yeah, it makes me think. I just finished this other Forbes author book. Since I'm so like us, I want to do a book swap with you too, so we can read.
Yeah.
but it's this Scale Up by Vernon Harnish. I'm not sure if you read it, but it's a short book. But a lot of it talks a lot about, how to create the company that you want so that you can scale. And a lot of it comes from these, team, listening to the team and, creating owners of items. And I thought one of the things that really like struck me that I wanted to mention was, how people bully each other, right? Or gang up on each other. And it struck me because I'm one of those people that whenever I hear something happening, I call everyone, right? To talk about like what I want to hear, what everyone's experience has been. And
Yeah.
that's not the right decision.
Nope.
Because no. So you want to, if there's ever an issue, everyone needs to get together at the same time to talk about it. Because that's how blaming and finger pointing happen. Right. And when everyone's together, there's nothing that you should be able to say that's not, if it's the truth, and everyone should be able to hear it together. Right. Even the one who's being said, oh, is someone so's fault. Okay. Well, so and you and me, we all need to sit together and talk about what had happened. And that makes sure that everyone's protected. And it really was like a aha moment for me, because that was exactly what I had didn't think was the right decision. I always thought, okay, let's gather the information and get a plan, and then I'll talk to but it made me really realize that I think that's true, because a lot of things people would say to you directly, they wouldn't say in front of that person. And why is that? Because maybe it's their truth, but so things like that, I think, just to be more open and get everyone on the same team and like themes and just I really liked it. I thought it was very very insightful. A good one for you if you like it.
Yeah, I definitely will look into that. I think there's a lot of education that can go around having those critical conversations and dealing with it in a way that we can still be honest and show up transparently with because that's really important to me. I really want to make sure that I am being true and reflecting everything that I'm also expecting from my team. And I have struggled with having those conversations of conflict for sure, because I'm also a people pleaser. And so it's been like, it's really hard to separate myself. But for the betterment of my business, I've really had to learn how to do that, because I can't have my team be madly in love with me all the time, unfortunately, as much as I want them to.
So as a leader, how do you stay grounded and motivated while driving innovation and meaningful change in your field? Because it sounds,
Yeah.
yeah.
Both cases. So I have this duality, I have my professional life, which is BetterCertify, and I'm really laser focused on how we want to change this industry. And I genuinely feel like if our company wasn't pushing that change, it probably wouldn't happen, or maybe would have taken far longer for it to happen. So I think as I continue to see us achieve things, get approval in different states, or maybe get more students that come to us and they're like, hey, this is the first time I've taken an online class and I've been licensed in this industry for 20 years.
Wow.
Um, yeah, you get these like really exciting new things that are happening, which help. That's what helps me kind of continue to go back to that. Okay, if I'm feeling that this is hard or taking a long time, I remind myself of how much progress we've already achieved. And then on the other side with my mission, which with my commitment to advancing women, I I really focus on my legacy. And legacy isn't just about what work I'm doing within my organization or within my family. It's really on like a community as a whole. And so if we're wanting women to continue to sustain the species from like the most broadest aspect of our society, we need to start treating them better. And we need to make it so that we're able to just that they're able to thrive just as if we were starting the society from the ground up and looking at it from a lens of patriarchy. How can we kind of shift the narrative to benefit women a little bit more?
Yeah. So when you from your online curriculum, are you doing any kind of, is there any statistics? Because I'm a super nerd over here on women versus men viewing the data and completing courses, is there any kind of difference on what you're seeing? I mean, I know it's a male-driven industry.
Yeah.
Kind of, what percentage of compliance or these things are, would you say, rules that men are having versus women? 80-20?
I
It's
don't know.
almost around 80-20, and and kind of, yeah, so it's been pretty low.
You definitely have given me something that I want to look into. I know for a fact that our industry, and we are a subsidiary of the construction industry. So our industry being like that environmental abatement and testing industry are is only 18% women. But a lot of the industry is made up by laborers. And so a lot of the laborers are going to be inherently men solely because, well, there's a scheduling aspect to it. It's very difficult on a woman, but you got to look into the case of just a man is stronger than a woman, yeah, biologically. So they're going to be doing a lot of the labor intensive work. But from the look of like regulatory from the top down focus, I'd be really interested to see how many women are leaning into and electing to take more advanced uh training modules uh over like a man, which I
Yeah.
haven't looked into.
So I think that's another interesting thing about, I think it was a different book I was reading, but when people kind of mandate classes, and they
Mhm.
recommend it, well, I mean, and of course there are some where you have to, I worked for a um, workers' compensation. I did workers' compensation
Oh
marketing.
yeah.
So we did
Yep.
like that. That was like, you have to do this training. But I think then there's all these other industries where we want to, offer training opportunities, but does everyone want the same thing? Right. And that kind of goes back to, by making it optional, or like almost being like, hey, you've been accepted into this if you want it, versus this is required. Like, what is the difference on the end game, and sticking factors, and even for women, is that maybe that's not something that they're happy where they are in their position. They want to have the family balance. Maybe this other
Mhm.
task they're going to take is going to give them opportunity, but maybe that's not what they want. Like, do you see any of
Yeah.
that kind of, what do you feel on that?
I think on a broader scale, we and me specifically can't come out and say that the solution, like investing into childcare or instilling flexibility, is going to be the solution for everybody. One thing I really focus on is who are those sideline workers that really do want to work, that want to be back into, those individuals like a couple from my high school graduating class, go on and get their undergrad and master's degree in significant industries, but then, decide to stay home and are only doing that because they would make less money than it would cost for them to send their their children to daycare. So those individuals, how can we really change the system, rebuild the table, or the way that I like to say it, instead of sitting at the table, rebuilding the table to benefit them, to allow them to get back into whatever they want to do. Um, I think there's a huge opportunity. I really do. And I think that there's enough people that want it. As for online training, so our industry is mandated through a lot of regulations, and the renewal requirements are kind of set in stone with that, which I think is almost a little bit of an unfortunate thing. It's good for a business model because I serve that need or that requirement, but we need to be cognizant whenever we're setting regulations that there needs to be, as our society continues to grow and change and new technology comes in, we need to be reviewing these regulations, and we need to make sure that they are still applicable. When asbestos regulation and lead paint regulation was introduced, it was very important to have an annual renewal requirement, or maybe every 3 years, which is the lead paint. But is it now? And how long do these classes have to be? And that's the part that I really wish I don't know if I could ever go and change, but I'm a big advocate on making sure that we're putting in systems and rules that actually benefit the stakeholders.
Yeah. Well, that's really, yeah, very interesting. So guess to close, this has been really exciting. And so your book, The Changemakers Wanted, is already creating a buzz. Uh, Tell us when it's being released, the official release. Is there any plans? What's next for you? And where can the audience grab a copy?
Yeah, so Changemakers Wanted, it publishes February 18th. It is available Amazon, Barnes and Noble. My website, danayawilson.com, is also a good place to see what I'm up to. And then lastly, if you identify as a change maker and you want to continue to push forward these changes, I would say connect with me on Substack. Excuse me. That's really where we're building that change maker collective, and it's just a network that we can start to communicate and prep for our next round of change.
Wow, awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. To learn more, you can visit Danaya's website, BetterCertify.com. She's also on LinkedIn. And make sure to reserve a copy of her book on Amazon. And for all of our listeners, please join me next week on the Covert Code as I interview another industry expert on a topic to help you succeed on and offline. I'll see you in the pixels. Aloha.